Russian forces have unleashed their heaviest aerial onslaught since the war, raining down hundreds of missiles and drones across Ukrainian cities, stretching air defenses to the breaking point and leaving Kyiv, Odessa, and border towns in the wake of this attack. Ukraine says a wave of missiles and drone attacks struck the city of Kharkiv and several nearby districts overnight, causing destruction and injuring at least 11 people, including 2 children. Ukrainian President Zelensky shared these images, saying at least 8 Shahed drones struck the site, damaging nearby apartment buildings as well as in Kharkiv. He said most of these attacks targeted civilian infrastructure and have no military purpose. Ukraine's southern Odessa region also came under heavy Russian attack. Kyiv says a delivery depot and several cargo trucks were destroyed. No casualties are reported. Ukraine's Sumy region is also under constant Russian attack. Russian aerial attacks have stretched Ukraine's air defenses, raising fears about Kyiv's reliance on Western systems. Ukraine, on the other hand, has been launching deep strikes within Russian territory, while Russia has been using superior air power to pummel Ukrainian positions. Kyiv has been relying on long-range drone strikes to inflict damage inside Russia. Debris from one attack damaging a residential block in the Russian capital earlier today. As the fighting rages, diplomatic efforts to end the war have intensified. European leaders, led by France, are pushing for deeper economic sanctions and a united front to pressure Russia into a ceasefire. Emmanuel Macron is warning that the U.S. response or lack of response will be seen as a test of President Trump's credibility and commitment to global security. Behind the scenes, the push for peace is gaining momentum. Turkey has proposed hosting a summit with the leaders of Russia, Ukraine, and the United States to broker an end to the war. Moscow says that it's sending a team of negotiators to Istanbul for a second round of direct talks with Ukraine on Monday, though Kyiv has yet to confirm that it will attend. Joining me right now from Berlin is Ben Aris, who is an editor of BNE Intelli News. Thank you so much for joining us on WION, and welcome back. I want to ask your opinion about recent comments made by Emmanuel Macron, the French president, that imposing sanctions on Russia and whether or not Donald Trump will do that or not will be a test for the U.S. president.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, absolutely. It's a test. I mean, the ceasefire talks were launched in Riyadh in the middle of February. They've been going on for a couple of months now, but they've got bogged down and they really haven't gone anywhere. And the problem is that Trump in particular is seen to be pressuring Ukraine. I mean, he was bullying them into his minerals deal, which happened. At the same time, he's put zero pressure onto the Kremlin. And moreover, in most of the talks, that Trump has rolled over and adopted the talking points, the negotiating points that Russia's insisting on. Things like lifting banking sanctions, things like acknowledging sovereignty over some of the annexed territories that Russia holds, in particular the Crimea. And now we've come to a tipping point, if you like. I mean, at the weekend, as you've been reporting, that there was a massive missile and drone barrage against Ukraine, the biggest since the war started. And this comes in the middle of these so-called ceasefire talks. And it doesn't look like Putin is interested in peace at all. Quite the opposite. He's launched one of the biggest attacks there's been in the last 3 years. And so Macron and the European Union, which are very firmly behind Kiev. At the same time, the coalition of the willing, I mean, the top four leaders from the EU were in Kiev 2 weeks ago and listed a whole bunch of new, very strong sanctions. In addition to that, German Chancellor Merz said at the beginning of the week that restrictions on the use of NATO-supplied long-range missiles was going to be rescinded, which is another escalation step up. And yet we've heard nothing from the White House and no talk of sanctions, no pressure. And if the ceasefire talks are stalling, then now's the time to apply them. And Trump is not doing that. So Macron is calling him out. He's trying to shame him into taking some action and to come down on one side or the other, because at the moment, until now, Trump has been more or less supporting the Russian position.
Right. And just to play devil's advocate, what about someone like Macron and the European Union in general? Have they been successful with their sanctions in preventing Russia from these strikes and encouraging Russia to come to the negotiating table? Just a two-part question. And what do you make of President Trump's envoy saying that Russia's concerns are valid about NATO enlargement?
Unfortunately, the European sanctions have been a failure. I mean, you take, for example, at the end of 2022, that the EU banned all imports of Russian oil products and crude oil. And yet Russia is due to make $260-something billion this year from the export of oil, because all it did was just reorientated its oil exports to Asia, to India, to China, and it hasn't been affected. At the same time, Russia's economy has been one of the fastest, strongest growing economies in the world for the last 2 years, whereas the European Union has been sliding into recession. Here in Germany, we've had 3 years of zero and negative growth in a row. So without the American help, the European sanctions are fairly useless. The Americans have rolled out some strong sanctions against the banking sector. They've been targeting individual tankers in the shadow fleet, which has actually proved to be surprisingly effective. But we're not seeing any more moves like that. As for Kellogg's comments on NATO, again, that's a bit of a giveaway in so much as the Russians have been saying from the beginning that this is all about their security concerns of NATO expanding eastward, and particularly the fear that Ukraine will join NATO. And then you have the possibility of NATO missiles on the Ukrainian border. It's 5 minutes flight away from some of about 80% of the Russian population. And for Putin, that's an absolute red line. But, from the Ukrainian side, they've been denying that this is the case, or rather they say that Russia simply wants to recreate the Soviet Union and conquer or destroy Ukraine. So for Kellogg to come out to what is actually a Russian talking point is surprising. Nevertheless, I think that is the actual reason. Jens Stoltenberg, the former head of NATO, also admitted that it was all about NATO. And it may be that the US side are sort of warming up to negotiating, because the top of the list from this meeting that should be happening on Monday in Istanbul, top of the list is that the Russians are insisting that the West produce a legal document, a signed piece of paper, promising that Ukraine will never join NATO and will go back to its stance of neutrality.
Mm. Very interesting. Okay, we'll be watching very closely. Ben Aries, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for joining us on WION.
My pleasure. Thank you.